Consider for a moment the radical power of perspective. When we slow down and examine our interactions honestly, many of the grievances we have carried may shift shape. What once felt like injury from others can sometimes be revealed, in a flash of clarity, as an instance where we ourselves were the cause of pain. That sudden insight, the realization that you may have been the one who wronged another, is a mercy. It is an opening granted by Allah for sincere reflection and correction. As you sit with this thought, you will notice how tempting it is to remain convinced of your status as the injured party. Yet personal reflection can produce a surprising change. The position you held as the offended may, upon careful examination, reveal you were actually the offender. Perhaps you were the one who pushed, alienated, or exploited while you believed you were being harmed. Perhaps you were the oppressor when you thought you were oppressed. These reversals are not merely intellectual exercises, they are invitations to spiritual reform. To recognize that you contributed to another's suffering is painful, but it is precisely that pain which can become the catalyst for repentance and restoration. The prophetic tradition offers a striking illustration. A narration recounts 3 men trapped in a cave with a great stone blocking the entrance. In their distress, they agree to make supplication to Allah by calling upon the one deed each had performed sincerely for His sake, hoping that such sincere acts might be the reason Allah delivers them. Attend especially to the story the second man tells. He confesses that he once loved his cousin with an intense selfish passion. He pursued her, and when she refused, he exploited her need. In a moment of desperation, he offered her money in exchange for compliance. She consented only because of her predicament. But as he had her where he wanted her, on the brink of committing the wrong, she cried out, "O slave of Allah, fear Allah and do not break the seal that He has not permitted you to break." Her call awakened him. He rose, fled, and did not complete the sin. In his supplication he said, "O Allah, if I refrained for your sake, then remove the stone." Allah removed it a little. Reflect on the asymmetry of captivity in that scene. In the cave, the man felt physically trapped. That night, the woman was morally and emotionally trapped by his manipulation. His awakening changed the course of both their lives. These stories teach us that we rarely perceive the full consequences of our actions on others. What seems like a private transaction to us can be a life-shaping moment for someone else. We may be so preoccupied with our own suffering that we fail to see how we have been the cause of another's suffering. This realization should move us toward empathy. Life is a web of mutual trials. People test us, and we test people. To ask, "How do I protect myself from someone's anger, envy, or hypocrisy?" is natural. Yet the earliest generation of believers were more alarmed by the possibility of their own anger, envy, or hypocrisy. Why? Because harming someone in this life damages the soul in the sight of Allah, while enduring harm patiently can be a means of reward. The prophetic counsel prefers spiritual safety over worldly vindication. To be the servant of Allah who is unjustly killed, rather than the one who kills. Be the one who is wronged, rather than the one who wrongs. This is an ethic that privileges conscience over triumph. Imam Hassan al-Basri made a penetrating observation that helps explain this divide. He said that the eye of the hypocrite is outward-looking, always scanning, always suspicious, convinced the world is against him. The hypocrite feels like every shout is against him, and that suspicion supplies a constant justification for retaliation. The believer's gaze is inward. The believer monitors the heart, corrects the self, and is quick to attribute good motives to others. This inwardness is not weakness. It is a moral strength that prevents escalation and protects communities from cycles of revenge. The way we use our voices matters. The Prophet ﷺ warned against a harsh, braying tone, likening the worst kind of voice to the braying of a donkey. Pleasant speech is not mere civility, it is a guardrail that reduces harm. The believer watches even the tone of speech to ensure avoidance of offense. Small gestures, a brief sharp retort, a tone of condescension, and offhand insult accumulate. On the day of judgment, those moments are not forgotten. Constantly constructing oneself as the perennial victim blinds a person to the ways they have wounded others, often in small but significant ways. It is readily possible to arrive before Allah with a heavy burden made up of many small transgressions. Those who refuse self-scrutiny and excuse their habits may find their ledger filled with overlooked injuries. Conversely, those who are fortunate enough to be touched by insight and rare enough to admit their wrongdoings can begin the work of purification. Recognition without humility is insufficient. True remedy requires both acknowledgement and reform. A helpful, practical rule is to own what you did. If you were 30% at fault and the other person 70% at fault, accept your 30% and seek the reward for that 70% you bore patiently. The Qur'an praises those who forgive and make amends, so whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward is with Allah. The promise is not merely rhetorical, it signals a real spiritual economy. Forgiveness and repair yield a reward that transcends the immediate balance of power. Scholars have distilled righteous conduct into practical habits. One early teacher described 3 traits toward which the righteous incline: a generous soul that does not cling to petty grievances, patience in the face of harm, and wholesome, pleasant speech. These 3 qualities form a trio of preventive measures. Generosity of spirit reduces the urge to retaliate. Patience prevents rash responses that cause irreparable damage. Pleasant speech prevents many harms before they begin. When these traits are practiced, the believer often receives tangible benefit in this life as well as the next. Hostility can be displaced by affection, and old enemies may become trusted companions. The Qur'an gives a concrete command that aligns with this approach. Repel evil with that which is better, and watch as hostility sometimes turns into friendship. Response with good is not naive passivity, it is an active moral strategy. When you choose the better response, when you retract a sharp word, when you forego retaliation and instead demonstrate righteousness, you interrupt the cycle of harm and open the possibility of transformation in the other. History supplies moving examples. Some who had been involved in grievous wrongs later became models of repentance and reform. Those who could not reverse a particular injustice nevertheless used their remorse to build legacies of correction. A person who took part in an atrocity may not be able to undo the past, but he can channel his regret into a lifetime of rectifying work. In the early community, men who once wronged others sometimes repaired their souls by dedicating their remaining years to justice and the welfare of those they had harmed. This shows us that regret, when harnessed, becomes a spur to real change rather than a perpetual burden. If the one you wronged is no longer available, perhaps deceased, seek ways to compensate by serving the living who reflect the same harm, or by pursuing restorative actions in the broader community. Such corrective works do not annul past sins in a technical accounting, but they manifest sincere repentance and reorient the soul toward good. Repentance, then, is not merely a private feeling. It is a reallocation of one's life toward the opposite of the original crime. Self-accounting is an indispensable spiritual practice. Regular reflection, nightly audits of where you fell short in dealings with others, is a discipline that reshapes character. Ask the hard questions. Did I speak harshly? Did I take advantage of someone's weakness? Did I withhold help I could have given? Where you find fault, remedy it. Where restitution is possible, pursue it. Where it is not possible, seek Allah's forgiveness and perform beneficial deeds in the world as a demonstration of genuine remorse. Controlling the tongue is central to this effort. Pleasantness in speech is a discipline that prevents small offenses from becoming lasting wounds. The Prophet ﷺ's admonitions against harsh speech are not mere stylistic preferences. They are social technologies for maintaining the integrity of community bonds. A single careless phrase can have disproportionate consequences across a lifetime. Therefore, watch the tone, the cadence, the choices of words. Humble your voice when necessary and prefer reconciliation to proving a point. The moral psychology of humility protects against the inclination to inflate one's own suffering to the point that it justifies oppression. If we train ourselves to look inward rather than outward, we break the habit of always dramatizing our own martyrdom. We stop casting others as villains in every narrative, and instead see the common human frailties that we all share. This is not a call to self-flagellation. It is a call to responsible stewardship of the heart. Remember also that Allah tests people through one another. You may be placed as a trial in someone's life, and you may be tested by other people's conduct. The appropriate response is to strive to be a source of blessing rather than a source of harm. The more you deliberately cultivate qualities that benefit others, generosity, patience, kind speech, the more Allah will, by His grace, send people who will be a blessing to you in return. Perhaps the very relationship or reconciliation you long for will be granted because you chose to reform your own conduct first. Part of this teaching depends on sincere trust in divine decree. Nothing will befall us except what Allah has decreed. This conviction does not remove personal responsibility. Rather, it humbles us so we do not become obsessed with perceived slights. It anchors patience and redirects energy from grievance towards self-correction. Trust in Allah's plan should make us industrious in repentance, not lax in obedience. Practical measures follow from these principles. Develop the habit of pausing before responding in moments of provocation. Practice asking clarifying questions rather than assuming hostile intent. When you realize you were at fault, apologize promptly and without justification. Where possible, make restitution. If you cannot reach the person you harmed, find tangible ways to support the vulnerable or repair similar harm in the community. Make sincere supplication and increase in charitable deeds to seek expiation and healing. These actions are not simply therapeutic, they are ethical obligations that transform regret into repair. Internal vigilance is complemented by the communal ethic. Forgive where possible, and if reconciliation cannot be achieved, focus on doing good that counters the original injustice. The Qur'anic promise that the reward for the one who pardons and reconciles rests with Allah reframes interpersonal conflict from a matter of pride to a matter of spiritual opportunity. Choosing to forgive and work for better outcomes brings enduring reward even when worldly closure is incomplete. Finally, let the reality of the last day guide your present dealings. Every relationship will be accounted for. Every small injustice will be visible. Habitual self-victimhood risks obscuring the harm you have done, whereas humble self-inspection leads to correction and spiritual elevation. When you are granted the rare insight that you were in the wrong, do not dismiss it, use it. Apologize where possible, repair where possible, and restructure your habits so that mercy, patience, and pleasant speech become your default modes of interaction.